The old desk had been there for decades, an ancient relic among the newer, factory-produced furniture in the classroom. Its wooden surface was scarred with deep carvings, initials, and dates that spanned generations. When Daniel transferred to Blackwood High, he didn't think much of it. It was just a desk, old, weathered, and a little rickety, but it had a story. The first day he sat at it, his fingers traced absent-mindedly over the uneven wood. He could make out a few names, some random doodles, but one phrase stood out, jagged and deep, as though someone had desperately etched it into the desk's surface. Help me. Daniel chuckled under his breath. Probably a joke. The kind of thing kids did to freak out new students. Still, he felt an unease settle in his chest. The letters were rough, almost violent. Someone had pressed hard, each letter sharp and deliberate. That night, he dreamed of the desk, not just of the words carved into it, but of the sound, the slow, rhythmic scraping of a knife or nail digging into wood. It was distant at first, almost imperceptible, but then it grew louder, closer, until it was right beside his ear. Scratch, scratch, scratch. Daniel jolted awake. His room was silent. His heart pounded against his ribs. Just a dream, or so he thought. The next day at school, he noticed something new. Beneath the original words, more letters had appeared, letters that hadn't been there before. Please. Daniel blinked. He ran his fingers over the fresh carving. It was impossible. Someone must have done it overnight. He glanced around the classroom. No one was paying him any attention. Then, just as the final bell rang, he swore he heard it. A faint, almost imperceptible sound. Scratch, scratch, scratch. By the third day, the message had changed again. He's watching. Daniel felt the unease settle in his bones. He decided to ask around. Hey, does anyone know who carved into this desk? He asked during lunch. Hannah, a quiet girl who sat near him in class, glanced at the desk and frowned. You're using that one? Yeah. She exchanged a look with the others. That desk. It used to belong to a kid named Matthew Grayson. Daniel had never heard the name, and Hannah hesitated. Matthew went missing last year. Daniel felt his stomach tighten. Missing. No one knows what happened. He stayed late after school one night. The janitor said he saw him sitting at that desk, writing in a notebook. The next morning, he was gone. His backpack was still here, but Matthew wasn't. Daniel swallowed hard. What about the messages? The janitor said the carvings weren't there before that night. The weight of her words sank deep into Daniel's chest. He forced a laugh. So what? You think Matthew's trying to communicate with me from beyond the grave? Hannah didn't answer, but the look in her eyes said enough. That night, Daniel stayed late at school. The classroom was eerily silent, the dim glow of the streetlights casting long shadows across the desks. He sat at the old desk, waiting. His hands rested on the wood, tracing the words with his fingertips. For a long time, nothing happened. Then the air grew cold. Daniel's breath misted in front of him. The silence deepened, pressing in on his ears. Then, beneath his hands, he felt it movement. His heart pounded as he lifted his fingers. Before his eyes, new words began etching themselves into the wood, as though an unseen hand were carving them. Run! Daniel leapt to his feet, his chair screeching against the floor. The temperature plummeted. The light flickered. and then the scratching sound. Scratch, scratch, scratch. It wasn't coming from the desk anymore. It was coming from inside it. With shaking hands, Daniel yanked open the small drawer beneath the desktop. His blood ran cold. Inside was an old, leather-bound notebook. He picked it up. The pages were yellowed with age, the ink smeared and faded. But the writing was still legible. It was Matthew's journal. Daniel flipped through it, his breath quickening. The entries spoke of the desk, of the messages, of something lurking beneath the wood. I hear it at night, the scratching. It's getting closer. Daniel turned another page. I saw it today, in the reflection of the window. A face inside the desk. Another page. The final entry. I know what it wants. If I disappear, please don't sit here. Don't listen to the scratching. Don't let it see you. A cold gust of air blew through the room. Daniel felt the hairs on his arms rise. Then, slowly, hesitantly, he looked down at the desk. The wood was shifting. Beneath the surface, something moved, a shape pressed against the underside, pushing outward as if trying to break free. A twisted face, its mouth stretched into a silent scream, its hollow eyes locked onto Daniel's. He stumbled backward, knocking over a chair. The scratching sound turned into a frantic, desperate scraping. The desk trembled. The carvings deepened on their own, letters forming in rapid succession. Let me out. Daniel ran. The next morning, the old desk was gone. The school claimed it had been removed due to damage. No one spoke of it again, but weeks later, Daniel received a text from Hannah. It was a picture, a new desk placed in the same spot as the old one. Carved into its surface were two fresh words. Hello, Daniel.